Kentucky House Speaker Greg Stumbo says any House member who voted against a $300 million revenue bill will be left empty-handed when school construction projects are handed out. That means funding for Paducah Middle School is threatened because State Representative Brent Hausman of Paducah voted against the revenue bill. Hausman says even if he had voted for the measure, funding for the school still wouldn't have been guaranteed, and he says funding could still be restored on the Senate side.
To be able to say, if I would have voted for, I could have voted for the revenue package last week and maybe still not gotten a school. So it's hard to say, should you, could you, would you have sold your vote for the new school? There's a potential, based on what I'm seeing right now and based on what's happened in the last 7 months, that even if you did that, you wouldn't get the school.
All Republicans but one voted in lockstep against the revenue measure, which didn't raise tax rates but includes suspending a business tax break and accelerating sales tax collections. Well, as threatened by House Speaker Greg Stumbo after State Representative Brent Hausman of Paducah voted against the revenue measure, funding for a new Paducah Middle School is missing from a list of school construction projects endorsed Wednesday by the Kentucky House. And Hausman says that's not all.
We talked about schools. There are also the road plan or the transportation budget was passed as well. There are no road projects in Republican districts, and there are also no water and sewer projects in Republican districts. So schools, roads, waters, and sewers. So there are no projects in Republican districts.
Stumbo had said Monday that House members who voted against the revenue bill to raise $300 million would not get projects in their districts. Well, budget talks among Kentucky lawmakers have broken down amid differences over a proposal for building new schools while adding to the state's debt. The main sticking point is the House's proposal for about $1 billion in debt-financed projects to build new schools and other projects. Senate Budget Committee Chairman Bob Leeper of Paducah says negotiators at one point thought they had an agreement on the water and sewer projects.
So we found some recurring money, and we're willing to do that. Came back to the table that, thought we had an agreement. And as we worked through some language for the Category 5 schools and Category 4 schools to try to help that effort as far as seeing who was willing to help themselves with some recallable nickels, they call them, which are tax efforts locally. We got to the end of that effort about 11 o'clock, and the House came back again and said, well, our members won't vote for it unless they're certain they're going to get their projects. And, that was the holdup for days. And at that point, we realized they just weren't going to go past that, and that was put us into $1 billion worth of new debt.
When asked about the budget situation during his visit to Paducah Wednesday afternoon, Governor Steve Beshear said passing a balanced and responsible budget is the General Assembly's #1 job, and he hopes they keep trying until the deadline of April 15th. Beshear also said if the legislature decides to fund Category 5 schools, then Paducah Middle School ought to be included.
Because it's an atrocious condition. And kids don't deserve to have to go to school under those conditions. So if that's in the budget, if that program's in the budget, then Paducah Middle School ought to be in the budget. I know that it didn't get in there to start with because of politics. It ended up because the Republican representative from this area didn't vote for some of the budget things. It was not in there. Well, this is not a Democrat or Republican issue. This is an issue about our children. And so the schools that need to be repaired, if that's going to be in the budget, Paducah Middle School needs to be there too.
Senate President David Williams and House Speaker Greg Stumbo said Wednesday it appears lawmakers will miss their goal of passing a 2-year state budget on Friday. If a budget isn't passed by the legislature by Friday, lawmakers won't be able to consider overriding any possible budget vetoes by the governor. Stumbo said the House also disagrees with the Senate's proposed cuts in education funding. It's not looking likely that funding for a new Paducah Middle School will be included in the budget that'll be adopted this week in Frankfort, and that's disappointing for Senator Bob Leeper of Paducah.
We got their copy of the proposal, which took out any indication of funding for Category 5 schools. The governor had some funding in his proposal, but the House has chosen to, because it couldn't, I guess, come to some agreement on a limited number of projects, all the promises they've made on past votes and stuff, so they've chosen just to not fund any.
What really galls State Representative Brent Hausman of Paducah is that the House budget instead proposes reallocating money to fund a study of the Department of Education's method for ranking school construction needs.
In a budget year where you have $1 billion shortfall, you have to take the projects out. I understand that part. But to take $2.5 million in the next year, I can't think of what all you could study for $2.5 million. But to take $2.5 million to now let's just go back and study the process and talk more about the process, I think is ludicrous. I think it's also a slap in the face for the Department of Education.
Hausman says that's their responsibility.
This time I would entertain a motion for House Bill 1 as amended by Senate Committee Substitute and Committee Amendments.
Senate Budget Panel Chairman Bob Leeper got the final approval going that sends the bill to the full chamber later today. One of the biggest changes from what the House proposed?
The effort to construct the Category 5 schools, those urgent needs schools that, as the Speaker said, are crumbling. We tried to be fair to the schools. We tried to appropriate the necessary money. I think that is one thing that people be aware of.
Leeper says those schools' districts can raise property taxes to come up with rebuilding cash. He says if they do, the state will chip in to help. Jim Williams, KNN News.